Hello everyone, welcome to our last video of course 1 of how to use the engine for architectural visualization, where we're gonna learn how to drag, rotate and delete some of the furniture that we're gonna arrange using our Gizmo that we have created in our previous video. However, for the other remaining requests, we will carry them on to our second course that will start very soon. So if we play, we'll see a widget on the left side where we can drop some of the furniture, and by attaching our Gizmo we can rotate these furniture and also move them around, where we give the ability to our client who will test our project to interact and arrange the furniture as they wish. And if we, for example, want to replace these furniture, we can see how we did this in our blueprints. So before we start, we need to fix some of the errors that we used to see in our previous video. So for example, if we hit M for the movements and we move our Gizmo, you can see if we hit escape, we'll see a bunch of errors. So let's fix these errors before we start. So basically we're gonna actually remove the M button to activate the cursor or the movements of the Gizmo. This is actually not related to the error, but because now we wanna attach the Gizmo to the sofas or the objects directly, so we don't need to activate it since we're gonna use another button. So we're also gonna move the Boolean move function. And if we look again at that arrow, if we hit on the Gizmo and hit escape, you can see that our first error is coming from our add relative location node. So basically that error is telling that it's trying to access the Gizmo root, but it's giving like an accessing error. So to fix that, simply we're gonna bring a node called isValid just to validate for the add relative location node that it's accessing the exact Gizmo root. So we're gonna connect this here, and if we go back again, we actually don't need our sofa now, so we're gonna actually remove the sofa also. So test again. So if we move, you can see that now our error came down to set drag location, and it's basically also the same issue that shows that it's trying to access the location of that Gizmo. So after looking into different solution and how to fix this, we finally found that we can actually replace this with get world original location and connect this here, and let's compile and test this again. So if we move our Gizmo, you can see now that we have no errors. Last thing we need also to fix is the speed that we are showing using this Gizmo. So because if you look closer, you can see that the Gizmo is moving very fast. And there is a simple way actually to control this, and that's gonna be by dividing this vector value over a float. So I'm gonna just bring vector over a float, and the more we increase this value, the slower the Gizmo will be. So let's put a value of 30 and see how this is gonna go. So if you look at the movement now, it's much slower than before. If we go to 2 just to make sure, it's gonna be much faster. So it's better to have in between value, let's say for example 12. So now that we have our Gizmo fixed from all the errors, last thing we're gonna do is just to enable a highlighting material, and this is gonna help us to identify when the cursor move and hover on one of these axes, it will turn, for example, into a yellow color. So if I click, for example, on the X, I'm just gonna bring on begin cursor over. Let's bring all of the other axes, and also for the Z, and also for the end. This is actually one way to do it. There's maybe another way to do that, so this is just our way of how to reach to something simple and straightforward. So we're gonna group them, and we're gonna drag from this set material, and when the cursor begin over it, and we gonna bring a yellow material that we have created earlier. So, and the target's gonna be X. Let's duplicate this. Y, Z, bring these two. Sorry about that. Same goes here, but this time we're gonna set the material of the axis itself. So we have X, Y, Z, and if we go to these materials, so the X is the red. I'm gonna just adjust it here, and for the Y it's the green. Just browse it and assign it here, and also for the Z, which will be, sorry, the blue material. Take this one. Okay, and we're gonna connect this to a gate node where it will enable this process through an open and a close process. So I'm gonna create a route here, route, and connect this here. The same goes for the other process after the hover end. Okay, so let's compile and see how this is gonna go. And if we hover the mouse over the X-axis, the Z-axis, sorry, it will turn into a yellow. Obviously we need to increase the emissive power of the color, but for the sake of the tutorial, let's say that it's okay now. I'm gonna just bring this into a comment and write this highlighted material. So let's just put it on the side here. Okay, now we need to set up the process of attaching this gizmo to our objects in the scene, which is the sofas and the tables. So as you have seen in our video in the beginning, we have created a drag and drop widget, which we have learned in our previous videos. I'm gonna put the link for that video in the comment and the details below, so you guys can reach it very easily. So basically we have created a simple image inside Photoshop and arranged the text and moved our widgets of these sofas inside this main widget. So if we open, for example, sofa 2, we'll find that this is the same blueprint that we have created earlier, and include the sofa actor, which is sofa 2. This is just a simple process that we have done before, nothing complicated about it. So the next thing we're gonna do is just to prepare our gizmo to be attached to that one. So we're gonna use the right mouse button just as a way to attach that gizmo. And the first thing we're gonna do is we need to trace a line to that object, whether it's a sofa or a table. So let's take a copy of this one and Control W, duplicate it, and once we press this, we need to trace a line, and we need to set up how that line, or how that trace line will react after it hits for example, that component. So assuming, for example, that we want to set world location of that gizmo, we need to set the location to that component that we're gonna trace or we're gonna hit. So obviously this is gonna be whether it's a sofa or the table, and the location of that gizmo to be attached to will be to that, for example, that sofa. I know it's a little bit confusing, but once we compile and see how this is gonna go, so I'm gonna get world location, sorry, attach this to the location, and obviously, sorry, I put the target to the components, but it's actually the gizmo root. So we're gonna hit that component, we're gonna get the world location, and we're gonna set the world location of the gizmo root to that object. So let's see that. So now when we drag, for example, this sofa and we right click on top of it, you can see now that the gizmo will go to that location. And the first problem we're gonna notice that it's actually inside that sofa, and we can only trace the outside part of that sofa, so sorry, of that gizmo. So we need actually to find a way to fix that so it can be visible even if it's inside that sofa. So to do that, there is a very easy step to do that. It's just by fixing the material to be a translucent, and then just make sure that you disable the depth test. So obviously we did that before, so we're gonna compile that and save it. If we go also for this one, just make sure it's a translucent material, so you can get the option of for disabling the depth test. Again, for this one, apply, and the last one, which is the yellow, I'm gonna make it translucent and disable the depth test. Let's bring the emissive power to much stronger, so we're gonna put that as a power, pressing M to multiply the color to be much more stronger, and let's put the value, for example, for 2, and apply. Okay, so if we look at that again, F11 to maximize the view, and if we drag our sofa, right click, now you can see that we can actually see our gizmo from inside. So it's still not attached to that sofa, that's why it's moving away from it. So let's see how we're gonna fix the next step for that. So now that we have set the world location to that gizmo, to that sofa, we actually also can enhance that location by bringing the Z to above that sofa. Because even if we can do that sometimes, and different situation, you will not be able to trace even that gizmo, as you can see. So even that I can see that gizmo, I still cannot get the advantage of the mouse giving me the highlighted material option as long as the gizmo is inside. So we need to bring it a little bit above that sofa. And to do that, we're gonna split the location, and we're gonna just connect the X and Y and set up a value for that Z factor. Let's say, for example, around 100, which is fine, I guess. Let's test this last one time. Okay, right click, so this is okay now, and we can see that we can highlight or get the highlighted material from that gizmo. Next step we're gonna do is that we're gonna attach that component. So attach component to a component which is, let's say, the gizmo root is actually gonna be the parent, so it can, the sofa will follow that parent, which is the gizmo. and once we hit the sofa, we need that to follow the Gizmo route. So let's see, we need to keep the location as world, apply and play. So again, if we do that, you can see now the sofa will move with that Gizmo. So the next thing is we need to adjust how we can detach that Gizmo from that sofa so we can get it to the other one. To do that, one way we have figured to do it, which is not really the optimum way, but this is just as a way to fix this. Obviously you guys can discover something much more better than that, where we're gonna detach from component. Let's see, so we're gonna detach our component from whatever it's attached to, and also keep it as world. And last thing we're gonna do is that once we detach it, we want to set the visibility to that Gizmo route. We're gonna take this one to hidden, but to also represent this to the children of that component. We're gonna do the same thing here. So we obviously need, sorry about the mess, connect this here, and we need the visibility to be on. So let's see how we're gonna do that. So right click, the first one will attach to that, get Gizmo to that sofa. The second right click on the same object will detach it. So let's see how we're gonna do that. So I'm gonna drag, let's say, 2 sofas here. So once we click here, we can attach it, move it, another right click, disappeared, and once we hit here, it will appear. Another click, it will disappear. So now that we have fixed the movements for that Gizmo on the sofas, last thing we're gonna do is to build the rotation axis, which will enable us to rotate these sofas. So let's save, and then we're gonna add another static mesh. So we're gonna add static mesh, which is gonna be rotation. Already built a simple rotation object, which in 3D Max it's just basically a simple circle where I have enabled the renderable objects, and just cut some of these edges so we can see when it's rotated. So let's give it a color of I think red is fine, no problem. But how we can enable this to be visible in our example? So we just need first to see the viewport. We're just gonna bring it a little bit down. Let's increase the value for that Z, let's say for example 120, so it can be also attached. So we need to do 2 things. First, to enable the trace line to see that rotation, and to function as a rotation to rotate that object. So if you remember our axis component, that will enable us to define which actor or which static mesh we are clicking. So I'm just gonna duplicate this and simply just do the same thing, but this time for the rotation. So we need actually to increase our the axis variable, which we have created in our axis variable. So I'm gonna create just another one here, and we're gonna do rotation, save. Once we save, we can see it on the switch axis. So in the axis component, we can now see the rotation. So we're gonna remove the Z, and we're gonna connect it here. So let's compile this, and inside our event graph, we don't need actually to connect it here because we're not dragging, we're actually rotating. But what we need to do is to enable this function of rotation inside this, and this can simply be done by a copy from that switch or the axis. So let's take these Control W here. First let's give a space for our workspace here. So C, comment, this is gonna be the line trace. And over here we're gonna drag our event tick where we need to connect the switch or access variable. We're gonna connect this to our condition that is valid. And then for this one we're gonna get a copy from the access component also. Connect this to the access, and last thing we're gonna do is bring a copy from the access tract. Okay, so what we have here is the same setup that we have done for the line trace, but for the event tick, once we define which one we are choosing, we're gonna determine which function we are doing. This one is the movements, and the other one is gonna be, let's add local rotation. So this is gonna be add local rotation for, yeah, that's the one we're looking for. So to add the rotation to that axis, we need first to get the player controller, and this is much easier than dragging the object. So we're just gonna get input mouse delta. Basically this is the movements of the X and Y direction. We need only the X axis. We're gonna split this. So we need the X axis. We're gonna multiply this a float by a float, and let's set up a value, for example by 10, which is the value for the rotation, and we're gonna connect this to the yaw because this is the direction that we need the rotation to be done. So let's compile and test this, and we hit play now. And see now that if we click on that rotation static mesh that is representing the rotation, it will rotate. We just need to add highlighting material, so let's extend this. The same thing we did here, so I'm gonna just bring the rotation also. So on begin, cursor over, or the rotation, and also the end. Sorry about this mess. Just if we bring Control W to duplicate. I think this was the red material, and our target obviously will be the rotation. Let's Control W, duplicate, Control W. A mistake that I have done. This is gonna be the red actually, because this is where the cursor will end, and this is gonna be the yellow. Again, sorry about that. So I'm gonna connect this simply to that road, which is a really nice and cool feature inside these blueprints. So now the last thing we gotta do is the attachment of that rotation actor. We need actually to attach it, but we're gonna bring here the attachment where the rotation is gonna be the one that's gonna make this attachment. So if we test this, first let's see, it's highlighted, fine. So if we drag our sofas here, right click, and if we hit rotation, you can see now that it's rotating to the location, for example. Right click, and it's basically flipping back to the same location, because we need to adjust that rotation rule to be keep world. Same thing here. Compile again. This should do it now. So if we drag our sofa, right click, rotate, right click again, drag this one, for example, right click, and I guess this is actually in the right direction. So right click and let's bring this one. So yeah, this is because of the pivot thing, so let's bring another one. Now it's time to see how we can actually enable the delete of that actor, and this can be done by simply just adding a simple destroy node that we have done also earlier. Just we're gonna choose each actor or each static mesh and choose on clicked and add just the destroy node. Nothing special about this. So now that we have everything set up, before you start your project, for example, we can set our actor way far from that location, so it's not going to be visible. So once we start again and maximize our view, so if we drag this, so for example, right click, we get the Gizmo. Right click again. So again, if we choose this one, let's bring for example that one, and if we don't want to use this one, for example, if you just click on it, it will remove it. So now we can have a simple way of setting an interactive furniture process for your project. And obviously, as you have seen, this is just a rough setup of how to use these this blueprint that we have done. I'm sure you guys can keep developing this thing and make a better setup for that implementation. And hope this series, or the first series that we have done, obviously this is just something as a warning to one of the actors. So at the end of this video, we have reached to the end of our course one. Again, I know you guys, we have lots of other requests that we have not answered yet. We're gonna carry this to our course 2, where we're gonna create an interior and an exterior and be more specific. We're gonna discuss the interior part in more details. So hope you guys enjoyed our first course on how to use the engine for architectural visualization. And again, if you have any questions, please share it down in the comments, and hope to see you soon in our next course. And thank you very much.